food that gets him motivated, and he uses his own natural talent and ability, and his sensei or his master realizes that, he learns Kung Fu. Because Panda stopped trying to be like the Fab Five and realized that his training regimen was going to be different. And that he was going to train different, and he was going to do Kung Fu different. He stopped trying to be like other people and realized and started to be like himself. He realized that that was most effective for Panda. And I just want to encourage you to be free from stop trying to be like other warriors, other men, and be yourself. I'm not trying to preach a self-help sermon. I'm just saying I think it's sometimes so lost in that we come up and we read our Bibles and we start adding like fruits of the Spirit and the weapons of, the shield and the breastplate and all these things. And I think sometimes, I know I personally sometimes get so overwhelmed with all the stuff that I have to do that I forget that the book of Judges in chapter 3 teaches us that God can use you just as you are. Yeah, we have to grow. Yeah, we want to become holy. Yeah, we need to, pray and start working on some stuff. Absolutely. But the book of Judges says where you're at, what you have, the talents and the abilities you have, God can use you as a warrior, as a deliverer for your family, for your marriage, for your church, for the situation that you are in. That's right. That's what Judges chapter 3 can tell us. Warriors, you're unique, and what makes you unique is what makes you a special warrior and makes you able to fight like nobody else can fight. You can use your spiritual gifts as well. You're a mighty warrior when you use your spiritual gifts. See, talents and abilities come naturally. You're born with them. God gives them to you. And your spiritual gift, God gives when you're born again. Prophecy, serving, teaching, encouragement, giving, leadership, mercy, wisdom, knowledge, faith, discernment, speaking in tongues. If you have that one, you better have this one. Interpretation of tongues, healings, and miraculous powers. That's just a quick list of spiritual gifts the Bible says. Warriors, do you know which ones you have? Do you know what your spiritual gifts are? Because your spiritual gifts are part of you. And if you're going to do what comes naturally to you, they come naturally to you, and you love to do them because God has given you those spiritual gifts. If you don't know what your spiritual gifts are, how can you ever fight? You don't know what weapons you have in the bag. You don't know what comes naturally to you. And you'll always be Panda trying to fight like the Fab Five instead of Panda using his natural talents, his gifts that God has given him to fight. So what are your spiritual gifts? See, this became even more clear to me. We took the high school kids to Timberlea in February, this past February. And the guy, the guest speaker was Giles Davis, Mark Davis's brother. And he was talking about spiritual gifts for one session. And so after he teaches, we go have a breakout session for 20 minutes. And the whole time I'm thinking, what am I going to do for 20 minutes of spiritual gifts? I'm just like, we haven't talked about spiritual gifts in youth group yet. We haven't touched the subject. I don't know if that makes me a bad leader or whatever, but I'm like 20 minutes. Okay, let's just do it. To my shock, amazement, and great encouragement, we get to our breakout group. There's probably 12 of us sitting around in a circle, and the kids just start to share what they think their spiritual gifts are. Hey, I like encouraging people and helping and kind of organizing stuff. Hey, for some reason people seem to follow me. They seem to be okay with me leading. And just around the circle it goes. And then Tom Matt, one of the leaders, shares what his spiritual gifts are. And then Kathy Unger shares what her spiritual gifts are. And I'm last because I'm still picking my jaw up off the floor because everyone shared their spiritual gifts and I'm in shock. And so I share what my spiritual gifts are. All that to say, 2 weeks later, we're at small group, and Kathy Unger says, who they're helping us out in youth group, she says, my goal for you is that you never have to do administration again. And I'm like, I love you. Yes, I love your goal for me. Please make it happen by this fall. So, anyway, but all that to say, my wife, Holly, and Kathy have the gift of helps administration, and they can fight those battles on those battlefronts much better than I can. In fact, I still feel guilty emailing them and talking to them and hey, where are we at with this? Who's bringing the food? And I feel like a total heel, but they enjoy it. It's their joy to serve in that way. Where for me, it's just work. I know what their weaknesses are as far as spiritual gifts and stuff, so I can fill those gaps. My point is that when you know your spiritual gift, you can team up, you can stand firm in the gap Much better than if you have no clue. If you know what weapons you're fighting with, as a team, in your marriage, as an individual, you have a much better shot of victory and not defeat if you know what weapons you have. And you use those weapons to lead. You use those weapons to obey. It's imperative that you know who you are and what you have and what comes naturally to you. Because, look, the reality is the way I lead my home with the gift of like leadership, faith, wisdom, those spiritual gifts is going to be different than some of you lead your home with service, encouragement, and giving. It's going to be different, and that's okay. We can be different. We can lead differently. We can lead our homes differently. We can lead our kids differently. We can even lead churches differently. Churches have vast different leadership plans, abilities, skills. It's okay that we're different. That's fine with God, but it's not okay that we don't use our differences for the kingdom to grow our homes, our kids, to grow homes of faith, to build those homes of faith. You're going to lead differently. My dad was the kind of person that every day, I shouldn't say every day, probably 2-3 times a week, he tried to have us all after dinner just drop everything and go sit down and do a devotional. All 6 of us kids, sometimes it was a disaster, all right? But that's how he led. I don't lead like that, but I got frustrated for a time there where I was trying to do the same thing with my wife and my 1-year-old son, and it was just frustrating to me. I'm much more, let's go on a walk and talk about something. Like I like the freedom. I can't take, my dad's a structured person, I'm like a freer person. So when we're on a walk, we just talk about this or the sermon or whatever. You're different. It's okay that you're different. Use your differences to be a warrior and to stand in the gap and to stand strong. Look, I just want to real quickly before we get to the last one, just encourage you to just, again, and I may have already said it, but just be free from the pressure of living up to somebody else or something else. Just know that God can use you to be a warrior right now, today. You don't have to acquire special skill sets. You don't have to know how to wield a sword. Ehud used a dagger that he hid to deliver Israel. Be faithful with what God's given you and see how God delivers. See how God can use you to be a warrior and to be a deliverer. God wants you. He doesn't want you trying to be somebody else. He wants you. And he can use you. Third and lastly, warriors must have a plan but remain flexible. See, Ehud's plan was, I'm going to go in to the king, I'm going to stab him with the dagger. I don't know if you agree with that plan or not, but that was his plan. And I'm going to take the dagger and I'm going to go out because I know that waiting at the end of this corridor is a door with 2 armed guards. And once I come out, they're going to know that the king's dead. Ehud's plan kind of fell apart when his dagger wouldn't come out of the belly of the fat king. And now I hope you see the problem, because you have a dead king, guards all around, and no weapon. Nothing to fight with. See, Ehud's plan kind of fell apart, but he remained flexible. He decided that he was going to sneak out, lock the door, and pretend that the king was using the bathroom. That's pretty smart. That's pretty ingenious. He remained flexible on the fly. Look, our plans aren't always going to go exactly as we have it down on paper, exactly as we have planned, but that's no reason to ditch the plan. That's no reason to throw the whole thing away and say it's not working. Be flexible. Have a plan, but be flexible. Last 2 weeks, really quickly, I've shared about credit card and my personal credit card debt and then being convicted of it. And eventually it came to the point where I had to have a plan to get out of credit card debt. Like, I had to have a plan. Knowing that it was a debt, that I needed to do it, that's good. That's a good first step. But what was the plan? The plan was, and believe it or not, like, the plan was $500 a month goes for credit cards. We don't go out, we cut the dinners, we cut all the extra stuff. Like, whatever it takes, that's the plan. And we did that, $500 a month. Like, that's a lot of money that I am giving to a credit card company, and it stinks. All right? It stinks, but the plan is get out of debt. All right?